Hey, Wendy.
Hello, hello, Derek.
How you doing?
Fabulous in yourself.
I'm doing fantastic. It's a beautiful day today.
Hey, for me too. Where are you?
I am still in my favorite place. I'm still in Barcelona. And where are you these days?
I'm in my favorite place in Paris, France.
Okay, nice, nice. And did you catch any of the Olympics?
Yes, I caught field track and field and a bit of breakdancing, but I left breakdancing because the place they had it in was very dusty and my allergies were just a hot mess. So I left early. I missed Australia's performance, but
Oh, you can find it online.
oh, I did. I did. And
Well,
actually, that's a great tie-in to our today's
I was
topic.
I was just thinking about that. Just thinking about that. So you saw the experts, you saw the professionals, you didn't see all of them, but you saw many of them. You saw some of the best.
Mm-hmm.
But today we're talking about imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked up a quick definition of imposter syndrome, and it mentions intellectual or professional, feeling like an intellectual or professional fraud.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did a little bit more digging, I saw that there were actually 5 different types of imposter syndrome. So there's the perfectionist, the expert, the natural genius, the soloist, and the super person.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I didn't realize that there were so many different types of imposter syndrome. As I read through the descriptions of each one, it made sense. But I
Mm-hmm.
was like, Then I started thinking, well, which one am I? Which one have I felt in the past? Because I don't know about you, but I've definitely felt imposter syndrome in the
I
past.
think we all have. We all have at some level.
Yeah. And so for me, my imposter syndrome type was the soloist. So always feeling like that I couldn't ask for help and that I had to do it on my own. And because I couldn't get to the level I wanted to be at on my own, I felt like I needed to question my own competence or question my own abilities.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think for me, it's in professional.
Hmm.
You have jobs, especially as a woman of color. You're in a place, and people, listen, a woman of color living in Boston, you're in a position, and people look at you like, "How'd you get here?" And then you start questioning yourself, "How'd I get here?" Even though you're qualified and you have all the ABCs and XYZs to your name, as a woman, I think it's for me. It personally was always professional.
Hmm. Yeah. And, I was also remembering meeting someone, this was years ago, probably like 10 years ago. I was in Sydney, Australia, and I was meeting a friend of a friend. And this woman had moved from England. She had her she had her PhD. She was working on a postdoc. She bought a house. She was living with her wife. She was very successful. She was well paid. And she's like, "Yeah, but I don't feel like I should be doing this." And I'm like, "Why?" Because to me, I was really impressed. I thought,
Yeah.
"Wow, this is great, fantastic." And she's like, "Oh, I don't feel like I should rise above my station."
Ooh.
I know, right? And as the American in me was just like, wow, I can't believe you even said that. But then I'm like, that I think might be a quintessentially British thing, like not to rise above your station.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
But even on just a human level, even just like excluding countries, excluding cultures, the fact that you don't feel like you should, even though you already have, she already had risen and done, and she was so accomplished,
Yeah.
she still felt like she shouldn't be there. And I was like, wow,
Wow.
that's a lot. That's pretty deep.
That is definitely deep. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, even moving to the other side of the world didn't solve that for her. So imposter syndrome, I guess, just runs deep for a lot of people in a lot of ways.
Well, it starts from the cradle. You're told, as a person, I mean, again, as a woman, you're not supposed to do this. Women can't do math. Women can't do science. Women can't be in aeronautics. Women can't be mechanics. So then when you finally find yourself in a situation, you're like, should I be here?
Mm. Are women still taught that?
To a certain degree, I would say in my circle, no. But, you hear stories and you talk to other women, you hear their stories and like, we still do that. So
Mm.
I think it's still out there that women can accomplish certain things. With the Olympics being in Paris, they had a documentary about not to segue too much, about the marathon. And it's not until, and this actually happened in Boston, the Boston Marathon, where a woman tried to compete. And there's a famous picture. I don't know if you remember that picture of a guy tried to push her out of the marathon because she's a
Yeah.
woman.
And that was in the 70s, wasn't it? It wasn't that
Yeah, it
long
wasn't
ago.
that long ago. No, and she still looks great. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's an interesting because I was also thinking, is imposter syndrome something that gets put upon us externally from other people, or is it something that we just need to figure out on our own? Is it something that just develops from within, or is it some combination of the two? I guess it's the nature versus nurture question.
That's a great one. And it actually ties in perfectly with our guest today that we have, Ms. Patty Marcel, because I've known Patty for a very long time, gotta be well over 20 years now. So she's definitely one who has seen the nurture and the nature and all that good stuff in between for both of us, actually. So without further ado, let me introduce Patty. Patty brings over 20 years of marketing experience with a strong focus on the financial industry. She holds a bachelor's degree from Salem State University and a project management professional certificate from Boston University. In her current role as Director of Marketing Client Services, Patty is dedicated to helping clients build their brands and enhance their marketing presence. As a passionate advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion, she actively supports related initiatives. Outside of work, Patty is a podcast enthusiast with a particular interest in true crime. Did not know that about you, Miss Patty. She also enjoys traveling to top destinations such as Santorini, Venice, and Havana, dining out and experimenting with new recipes. Dinner invite, Patty? Just saying. Without further ado, let's please welcome Patty Marcel.
Hello.
Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you, Wendy. Thanks for the wonderful introduction. And you're always welcome to dinner when you're in Boston. I never know when that's going to be. So
That's true. True.
Can you take +1 with you?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, we teased up a couple of things about imposter syndrome. But before we begin, how would you define it? Like, what are your thoughts on what imposter syndrome is?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So it was great to hear the different definitions. There's different types of imposter syndrome. I didn't even realize that. So I did a quick Google search as you were going through it. And the soloist is not wanting to ask for help. And just reading that and thinking about my last experience, which is very detrimental to your career, is not asking for help, not asking for questions, kind of that fear that if you ask, you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, or they're going to kind of find out that you're a fraud. So what I've learned later in my career is ask. If you don't understand, ask the questions, ask the why. Now that I'm a director and managing a team, I always encourage my team to ask the why, because if you don't know the why, you really can't really solve the problem. You're just answering the question and not solving the problem. So that's something I learned much later is definitely ask for help, so I would definitely put myself in that kind of soloist category of imposter syndrome.
When you experienced if you experienced imposter syndrome, how did you recognize it in yourself? And as someone who's now leading a team, how do you see it in other people?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I didn't really realize it until my last promotion when I got promoted to director. I got hired as a manager. And even then I was a little, I hadn't managed people before. I hadn't managed a team. We had done rounds of interviews, and I even asked, and probably nobody asked this, is like, why do you think I'm fit for this role given I haven't managed, right? And it was just like already doubting yourself. Like, I'm getting into this role, I'm already doubting myself. But I became, I was hired, I was a manager, I did great. I felt comfortable. It's that comfortable level, right? And, I was a little bit more comfortable asking questions, more comfortable having a voice. And they had peers that got hired along with me. And I think when I saw they got promoted, I was like, well, I can also get promoted, I'm qualified, I'm smart, I'm doing the role. And I worked towards that, got promoted, and then it was the fear kicked in. Oh my goodness, am I really qualified for this? Can I really do this? Are they going to find out that I'm a fraud? It's all this self-doubt just kind of
Yeah.
eating at you, like, I don't know if I can really do this, even though you have the position. It's kind of this anxiety, and now it comes with more responsibility. It comes with more visibility, So when you're kind of in that corporate culture, you kind of have a buffer, right?
Yeah.
And now there's no buffer, You're the one that they're coming to with problems. You're the one who has to have a solution. You're the one, if somebody's unhappy, they're going to you. This happened, I'm not happy. So you kind of taking on that responsibility. So it was a little bit of that fear and self-doubt and, can I really do this? Even though it was something I wanted, something I was qualified for, something that, part of the role I was already doing. But when it happened, you're excited, but then you're also nervous and fearful as well.
Do you still feel that way?
Right now, I'm also in that comfort level. So now I've been in this role for 2 years and I feel like I'm doing good and I'm comfortable. But I think there's different times within this level that I do feel it still, when I'm asked to present, it's like, oh, they're really picking me. Or when I'm asked a question, oh, do they want me to speak up? So it still comes up. And then when I look towards the next role, right? So then I'm just like, okay, where do I want to go next? Do I want to stay comfortable and even keel, or do I want to get out of that comfort zone? And that's when it comes in again.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
How do you help your team? So do you see if team members of your team are experiencing imposter syndrome, or do they tell you, and like how do you help them out?
Yeah, and I don't know if anyone really expresses it. I don't know if I expressed it. It was a feeling that I had, and then I was like, oh, this is imposter syndrome. So I'm not even sure if I shared it. I think with my team, I just try to encourage them to ask the questions, ask the why, have a voice, and I'll call on them to be like, well, what do you think? Especially when you notice someone who's kind of silent in meetings. And I think that is what has helped me, when my manager was like, okay, let's ask Patty. Patty, what do you think? And I was like, oh, wow, they're really asking me, and it's like, yeah, you're in the role. You're the one making the decisions. So let's find out what you think. So really calling out on those people, especially when they're silent or they're not speaking, or there's missed opportunities, to be like, well, I noticed in that meeting you were pretty quiet, or you weren't really engaged. Don't be afraid to really have your voice and ask the questions and participate. And I'm still learning that too. I'm still learning that, especially when I'm around that C-suite. I can still climb up. But it's asking the questions, and then you're also having that, I want to ask the right question, and you kind of process, you don't want to ask the dumb question. I want to ask the right question. I want to feel smart and engaged, so you go through this whole process in your head. Meanwhile, somebody's asked the question that you processed, so it's
You're like, damn, missed my opportunity.
I missed my opportunity. So now I'm like processing the next question. What's the next question I'm going to ask? And then the meeting's over. So it's really having that confidence, and we all have those questions. It's just feeling comfortable to really ask.
That's true.
Let me throw something out to both of you, actually, and I can answer it as well. So we've heard the phrase representation matters. And so I'm kind of curious, going back to Wendy's point about how being a woman of color in finance or in different industries, you kind of felt this pressure to be a perfectionist or to be a soloist, not to ask questions, not to rock the boat. When you see women and women of color, so like the Hillary Clintons and the Kamala Harrises, and some of the other professional women, Oprah Winfrey's, achieving what they've achieved, does that, or has that had an impact on your sense of whatever you're trying to do, and if you have or are able to get past imposter syndrome?
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. Go ahead, Wendy.
It's definitely the case of if she can do it, I can do it too. You know, it kind of it reinforces, okay, so this person has accomplished something that I'm trying to accomplish. And if you know the person, you might find that they are not necessarily as talented as you are, or they may have something that you don't have, and you may have something that they don't have. But if they've accomplished it, then you can accomplish it too. So yes, it does help.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it helps to a certain extent. You know, I love Kamala Harris, and I love how she, at the first debates, when she was like, I'm speaking, getting interrupted. And I've felt that, you know, so it kind of gave me that voice to be like, I'm speaking, you know, to really get empowered to be like, I'm speaking. Because there's been times when you do reach that courage to speak and somebody overspeaks on you, or, you know, overtalks. And just kind of having that. So I think it's small nuggets that they do, you know, they might not even realize it, just to say I'm speaking, that gives me that empowerment, especially with Kamala Harris. I think Oprah, you know, she's amazing. Hillary Clinton's amazing. But sometimes to me, I still feel like, oh, they're just like, they're the exception, you know, they've made it. They're the exception. They're so out of reach, you know, but they may do something that say, you can do it too.
Oprah has actually talked about having imposter syndrome.
Really?
That's interesting.
Yeah, she has talked about it. Because coming from where she came from, looking the way she did, you know, especially in media where, you know, it's definitely a more slender woman, if you will, that's you know, pushed in front, or someone who's deemed by others visually, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but she didn't feel that she
more visually appealing.
I guess so, yeah, but she didn't feel she ticked those boxes, and so for her to be where she is, she actually has spoken on in one of the ones that there were times when she was like, I'm actually here, like I made it this far.
Yeah, I recall that she mentioned, I think, one of her early days as a newscaster, and she had her natural hair, and they told her to perm it, relax it, chemical relaxer, and all her hair fell out.
Yeah.
You know, so she did, you know, talk like they wanted her to look, I guess, quote unquote, more appealing, as you said, Derek, you know, have that more relaxed hair.
You know, this conversation is reminding me of a conversation I had recently. So I go to a lot of meetup groups, and I was in one where, the topic was, when does confidence cross the line into arrogance?
Ooh.
Yeah, it was a good conversation. It was a good conversation. And so what I remember from that one is, you know, we were talking about all these different things. People started off defining confidence and defining arrogance. And then, you know, the conversation kind of drifted and shifted. And then I said, well, you know, the example that the person who brought up the question, the example that he brought up is not quite fitting what you guys are talking about. I'm being a little loose with my memory here. Because people were talking about standards. They were saying, oh, you know, well, if someone falls up to the standard, meets up to the standard, then they're confident, but if they surpass the standard, they're arrogant. And I was like, I disagree with this.
Yeah.
And one person said, you know, if 100 people in a room say that you're arrogant, then you must be arrogant. I was like, oh, I don't agree with that either. So where I'm going with this is, I said, well, let's think of a more concrete example, which is the fashion and beauty industry, where for the longest time, the standard was tall, thin, blonde hair, and blue-eyed. And up until about the 1980s or so, that's what it was in the US. And then it began to change when you had someone like Naomi Campbell come along, who is dark-haired, dark-eyed, dark-skinned. And other people could have said, the gatekeepers probably did say, you are being arrogant to think that you can be a model here. But she had to have confidence to show up and to really push it. And I was thinking, you know, the gatekeepers in another light could be seen as being the arrogant ones, because they're the ones who are saying the standards should never change. It should always be this. Yeah. So I feel like I'm drifting a little bit from the topic here, but I mean, Naomi Campbell could easily have had imposter syndrome if she had listened to naysayers. She probably did. I would love to have her. Naomi, if you're listening, we'd love to have you as a guest on the episode. Someone call her agent, we'd love to have you. But yeah, so, you know, it'd be interesting to hear. But yeah, if she had imposter syndrome and how she was able to overcome it. Like, who were her models, who were her influencers, who were the people that she saw as being representative of where she should go? Or did she just have that drive to say, F this, I'm going for it?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, part of that, though, is also, as we touched on earlier about nature versus nurture. I mean, when you have someone in your background saying, you can do this, you got this, that changes the whole dynamic of what you pursue. Because if you have someone saying to you, and I don't know about you guys, but I can speak for myself, when I've had people tell me I could not accomplish certain things and I should not do certain things because they wanted me to stay in a certain path that they felt was right for me, not the one that I wanted for myself. And then you start questioning yourself, like, is this the right move for me? And whether, I mean, in some cases I did do what I wanted to do and I was glad I did it. In some cases I was like, I probably shouldn't have done that. But, we all have those moments. But I think if you have the right cheerleader or the right people instilling in you that, yes, you have that confidence and yes, you can do this, it makes a huge difference.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I've definitely had those cheerleaders. My mom was my biggest supporter, biggest cheerleader. But it also, you have to believe in yourself. Mom says, you can do it. You're great. Go for it. You can accomplish whatever you want. That's one thing. But then you also have to believe in it because, all those cheerleaders, sometimes they're not with you day to day in your office or in your environment. And when you kind of go and you feel a little bit isolated, as you said, Derek, like you go and sometimes you're the only, I've been in my career over 20 years. There's been many times that I've been the only, or, maybe not the only woman, but the only woman of color, and, when you kind of look around and you're seeing you're the only, you're like, oh, I'm going to stay in my lane. I'm not going to rock the boat. I'm not going to ask any questions. I'm not going to, get kicked out. I'm just going to, stay comfortable. And I think, as I think back, they had been times where I've had supportive managers who are like, where do you want to go in the next level? What's your next step? But I was like, nope, I'm staying right here. I'm staying comfortable, but having that push to be like, you need to do something next. You've been in this role for a couple of years now. Here's a role I think you should go for. So it's having those people who may not look like you, but who recognize in you, kind of push you along to say, guess what? I think you're ready for this part. You might not feel ready, and that's that self-doubt, but you are. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And you're actually reminding me of a phrase that I've lived my life by for the past 5 or so years, which is the rules are all made up. The rules are all made up. And so, we're leaning heavily toward the professional side of imposter syndrome, but on the sort of personal side, like maybe you want to be the first in your family to go to college, or maybe you're thinking about buying that house in the country, or maybe you're thinking about doing something that someone in your family or your friend group has never done. And you're like, oh, I'm rising above my station, or I don't know how to do this. I can't do this, or, it's too big for me to take on. It's like, the rules are all made up. I mean, if you're feeling this way because you don't see everybody else around you doing that, that doesn't mean that you can't or that you shouldn't.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Great point.
That is for sure.
I mean, that's how I live my life. And that's why I encourage others. I try to definitely encourage younger people to examine the world differently and examine, where they are and what they're doing differently, because the rules are just whatever we all agree to. Just like money. Money's not a real thing. We just all agree that little pieces of paper are worth X amount of dollars or euros. Or it's not real. It's nothing. It's not real at all. It's just representations of value. Exactly. So, it's just all made up, and we create what we want. And
I dare you to go to pay your mortgage and tell them that.
I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. Like, I don't actually use cash anymore. Like, it's rare. And so all I see, I log into my bank account, I see all these numbers, and then I get my bill. I'm like, I see all these numbers. And as long as those numbers are less than these numbers, I'm like, great, it all works out. It's just numbers. It's just all value that's just in a computer somewhere in the cloud. So yeah, as long as I don't run out of some numbers and I can still eat with those numbers, we're good.
Hey.
Yeah. Patty, are there any words that you can share in terms of how you how you would help new managers or how you would help your team think about sort of, getting past any, so maybe they haven't told you, maybe you're not quite seeing it, but how would you sort of like put something out there so people can say, all right, I'm going to take this chance?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I wanted to share as well, as I kind of thought back, like imposter syndrome, where it started, why it started, what made me feel this way. Looking back at my career, they did have sometimes, I talked about supportive managers, but non-supportive managers, right? And we all want to have a seat at the table, but then it's also having a voice at the table. So
Ooh.
in many, many moons ago, not in my current role, but I was silenced at the table, and that sticks with you, So if you're already kind of having that fear of not asking the right questions or not saying the right thing, and getting the courage to ask a question and then be silenced, that has an impact on you. And I was actually told, why don't you just come to the table and listen? No more questions, just come and listen. And it was like, okay, duly noted, and I'm just going to go there and be silent. And that definitely had an impact on me. So I would say to managers who are listening, people who are managing people, don't silence anyone. Everyone has a voice. I believe the power of speaking and contributing. And maybe it was not the right question, I'm not sure, but explain the why, And I would tell the individuals, if you're ever silenced, ask why. Why was that not a good question to ask? Or why did you think my contribution was not to be received? Be empowered to ask why, because you deserve that. You deserve to know why. I would also say, take the opportunity to ask those questions, feel empowered, ask those questions. And managers and leaders, people leaders, call on people who are silent. Invite them to the table, but also, and now they're invited, have them contribute and feel empowered to be a contributor. So those are some of the things that I would say. If you're invited to the table, all right, I'm not just going to sit silent. Time to speak up and share my thoughts and learn. And if that wasn't the right question or that's not a good idea, and when it is a good idea, say, guess what? That's a great idea. Empower each other. And I don't think it's just managers, but people and colleagues. If you're in that room, if you're at that table and it's a good idea, say it. That was a great idea. Thank you for sharing.
Very well said, Patty. Very well said. It's absolutely right. I mean, it doesn't make sense to have people at the table and not allow them the opportunity to express an opinion or thought or direction that the company could be going, because you might miss out on something wonderful.
Exactly.
Imagine if 3M had told that guy to invent the sticky notes, to be quiet. Where would we be today? No, seriously. I mean, if he had been quiet and someone said, no, we can't, we don't want to hear what your idea is, we wouldn't have sticky notes.
Yeah.
So
and just the encouragement to ask, okay, thanks for the feedback, but why? Ask the why.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ask the why.
Fabulous.
So one thing that I would add to what Patty said, in the message to the managers is encourage your staff to share their thoughts and opinions, but also encourage them to ask questions, because you also don't want your staff to feel put on the spot, because maybe they're still processing, they're still trying to understand, and they don't have a fully formed opinion or a fully formed answer. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, okay, yeah, I'm turning it over to you, Joe and Bill and Sue. So, what are your thoughts, but also what are your questions? If you call on someone and say, okay, so what are you thinking? And they're still questioning, you might put them on the spot. And so then that will also lead to imposter syndrome too. So I was sort of like, there has to be some level of facilitation as well. So that's kind of where I was going with that.
Yeah. And I think just, encouraging your team to feel it's okay to engage. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to have a voice. It's okay to contribute. And, thinking of myself when I'm just processing, but then somebody else has asked the question. So don't lose that opportunity to use your voice.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Very true.
Yes. We all bring something to the table.
Absolutely.
We all value
Especially if you've been invited. You've been invited to the table.
Right.
So
Absolutely. All right. Well, Patty, thank you so much. We
thank
appreciate
you.
your insights and your experience and your expertise. I'd love to have you back for another conversation if you're willing. So
Absolutely. Anytime.
thank you so much. Thank you for keeping us in
Absolutely.
mind.
All
And
right.
for those of you who are watching, we hope you enjoyed it as well. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the question or comment field on whatever platform you're watching. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Things They Don't Teach Us. Take care.
Close back, close on.